Hello, Music 308 students. This is Mr. Guidry in the first of a series of short videos to replace the class lecture that would have been on major and minor key signatures. Our goal is to be able to identify any major or minor key signature and to be able to write any major or minor key signature. By the end of this series of videos, if you participate along with this document that's called the in-class handout that you should have downloaded from Moodle and printed, you will be able to do this, hopefully with ease. If you watch the preceding videos that I posted by different musicians, you should have a basic understanding of the sounds of major key signatures versus minor key signatures. Some people think that major sounds happier and minor sounds sadder, but that's all kind of objective, sorry. So anyway, let's get going. First of all, why do we even use key signatures and what are they? Well, as you can tell here, or any definition you find online, a key signature is basically a group of flats or sharps between the clef sign and the time signature, telling the performer which notes are flat or sharp throughout the entire piece, unless, of course, we use the natural sign or another accidental. So, for example, there's a direct correlation between major scales and major key signatures, which we'll talk about later. So let's say that we want to write a composition and we want to base that composition on the E-flat major scale. So you see an E-flat major, if you did whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, if you follow that pattern, you would end up with a scale that's got 3 flats. You see there's a B-flat, an E-flat, and an A-flat. Therefore, if you are writing a piece of music based on that scale, you might think it would look like this, where every time you have a B, an E, or an A, there's a flat sign in front of it, so that your piece of music would be based on this scale. And if you follow a few simple rules of writing melody, it would probably sound pretty good. But music theorists decided that this would not be the way to go. Instead of having all these flats and sharps throughout the entire, flats or sharps throughout the entire piece, they would add what we call the key signature to the information given to us at the beginning of a piece. So you remember from the first night of class, we started with a blank staff, which means nothing. Then we learned about the clef sign, which gives us some information. So we know that this line is G, and we know, of course, by now we know all the notes in treble clef. Later we learned about the time signature, so we learned that a quarter note gets a beat, 4 beats per measure. Now another bit of information at the beginning of the piece is the key signature. So instead of having to write all of these flats over and over again, the composer merely says, okay, this is based on the E-flat scale, so I'm going to be in the key of E-flat major. Therefore, I'm going to give the performer this key signature. So this means all the B's are flat, no matter where they are, not just on this line. All the E's are flat. So you see this first E is down here, this flat is up here, that's okay. All the E's are flat and all the A's are flat. So one of our goals is to be able to look at this and say, well, that's the key of E-flat major or the key of C minor. So how do we do that? So I'm going to show you a couple of methods. The first method involves 2 rules with 2 exceptions that will work all the time. And then we're going to look at something that I call the number line, which is the same as the circle of fifths. If you've read about that or saw the picture, this is basically the same as this, but it's just completely horizontal. Okay, so let's take a look at the rules. We're on page 2 of the document. Okay, the first rule has to do with keys that have sharps in the key signature. So let's say we had an A major scale. Okay, it would end up looking like this. A, B, C, D, E, sorry, F sharp, G sharp, A. Well, one property of all major scales is that the leading tone is always the last sharp in the key signature. Let's take a look at that. So it makes sense, right? We have the A major scale, so you know, of course, that A is the tonic, the home note. Well, the leading tone right here takes us right back up to A, which is our tonic. So the leading tone is always going to be the last sharp in the key signature. So if you look at a key signature like this, for example, that we just see the scale, to figure out what's the name of this key signature, you just look at the last sharp. So the last sharp here is G sharp. You find that on your keyboard, and then you go up 1/2 step. Not necessarily one video that I didn't give you, and if you look around YouTube, you may find it says go up a letter. That doesn't always work because of sharps and flats. So you go up 1/2 step. So a 1/2 step up from G sharp is A. So the name of the key signature, if we're thinking about major key signatures, is A major. It's that easy. And that works with any key signature with sharps because, again, the leading tone of its corresponding major scale is always a 1/2 step away. Remember, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. There's a 1/2 step. There's always a 1/2 step away from the tonic, which is the name of the key signature. So everything makes sense. So the key signature with 3 sharps is A major. Okay, so I'll do one of these with you, and then I'm going to ask that you please hit your pause button and try the other 2. Okay, so what we do is we find the last sharp in the key signature. So you see how they zigzag, and you notice that they always follow the same pattern. The first sharp is always F, second is C, third is G. We'll get to that later. So if you look at these sharps, you see F, C, G, D, A. So the last sharp is A sharp. So looking at a piano keyboard, you find A sharp, you go up a 1/2 step. Where do you end up? You end up on B. Don't make the mistake of writing sharps all over the place. Don't call it B sharp. You didn't land on B sharp, you landed on B. So a 1/2 step up from A sharp is B. So the name of this key signature, if it were major, is B major. Okay, so go ahead and hit your pause button, please. Try these 3 using this method, and then hit your play button and see how you did. Okay, so looking at this key signature, we see 2 sharps. F sharp, the last sharp is C sharp. Look at your keyboard, C sharp is here. A 1/2 step up is D. So the major name is D major. Going on, F, C, G, D, A, E. This one could be tricky, but it doesn't have to be. Follow the rules and you'll be fine. So if you look at your keyboard, you say, E sharp. Well, you know that's E. So E sharp is here. It's the enharmonic tone for F is E sharp. So here is E sharp. Go up a 1/2 step, you end up on this black key. And you say, well, that could be F sharp or G flat. What am I going to use? Well, since this key signature has sharps, of course, we're going to go with the sharp name. So a 1/2 step up from E sharp is F sharp. If you put G flat, that would not be correct because the key of G flat would, of course, if that existed, had flats in it. Okay, so that would be F sharp major. And then finally, the last sharp here, we're in treble clef. F, C, G, D is D sharp. So you find D sharp on your keyboard, move up a half step, you're on an E. So this would be E major. Okay, so that takes care of the first rule. So reminder, 2 rules, 2 exceptions. So that was the rule for sharps. The rule for flats is actually even easier. The rule for flats is that the flat before last is the name of the key signature. Okay, so you don't have to move up a half step, down a half step, anything. Whatever the flat before last in the key signature is, that is the name. So in this case, what's the flat before last? Well, we have, so reading from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. B, E, A, and D. The flat before last is A flat. So the key name of the key signature is not A. The flat before last is A flat. So the name of the key signature is A flat. For flats, there will be a flat in the name of the key signature for all flat key signatures except F. This is for major key signatures. So this would be A flat major. Okay. So the name of the flat before last is A flat. The name of the key signature is A flat major. Okay, this is of course the same one. So that's A flat major. I'll do this one with you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flats. B, E, A, D, G, and C. C is the last flat. The flat before last is G flat. So the name of the key signature is possibly G flat major. We'll see in a later video that every key signature can represent a major key signature or a relative minor key signature, but that's for later. Okay, so go ahead please and hit your pause button and figure out the answers for these 2. All right, so here we only have 2 flats, but we're okay. We have to have at least 2 flats to have a flat before last. The last flat is E flat. The flat before last is B flat. So the name of the key signature is B flat major. And here we have B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat. There's the last one. There's the one before last. Now notice there's zigzag. Be careful not to just go back in a line here and say, well, it's A flat. There's zigzag, so here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, here's 4, here's 5. So flat before last is a D flat. So this would be the key of D flat major. Okay, so that takes care of the 2 rules. There are 2 exceptions. The key with no sharps and no flats is the key of C major when we're dealing with majors. So you may remember the C major scale is a nice easy scale with no flats or sharps. And the other one dealing with flats, if the rule is the flat before last tells you the name, that means you have to have at least 2 flats. You can't have a 1 before last if you only have 1. So you need to remember that the key with 1 flat when dealing with major keys is F major. And if you had written the F major scale, you would see it's the same. Okay, so this follows the pattern, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You see that F is the tonic, and the only flat is B flat. All right, so now we have the 2 rules and the 2 exceptions. So to wrap up this first video on this topic, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and name all of these key signatures. So in this example, in this practice exercise, you have the 2 rules and the 2 exceptions represented. So please go ahead and hit your pause button. I would have a piano keyboard in front of you for the sharps to help you out, and go ahead and name all of these as a major key signature. And go ahead and hit pause and try that now. Okay, so let's see how you did. So sharps, the last sharp tells you the name. Well here, this is the first sharp and it's the last sharp. It's the only sharp. So it's not an exception. So this is an F sharp. If you were looking at a piano keyboard and you go up a half step from F sharp, you would land on a G. So thinking in major terms, that's the key of G major. Okay, here, the last sharp is right here in bass clef. So that's a B sharp. So if you were looking at a keyboard, you'd see that B sharp is the same note as C. So if you go up a half step from C, you're gonna land on the note that could be C sharp or D flat. And of course, there's always a hint to tell you we have sharps in this key signature, so we certainly won't use D flat. So this would be C sharp major. Everything is sharp. The next one, no sharps or flats. That's an exception to our rule. So that would be C major. The next one flat. We can't have a flat before last if we have only one flat. That's the other exception to the rule. So that's F major. Here, the last sharp is a C sharp. If you go up a half step from C sharp, you end up on a D. So that's D major. Now we have flats. Don't get the rules mixed up now. Some people will say the sharp before last or move up from the last flat. Make sure to keep those straight by doing the homework. After you do this enough times, it becomes second nature. So with flats, it's the flat before last. So in this case, it's E flat. So this is the key of E flat major, possibly. Now sharps, the last sharp is D sharp. Half step up from D sharp takes you to E. So thinking in major, that would take you to E major. And finally, one flat. Again, that's the exception to the rules. One flat is the key of F major. Okay, so this concludes this first video on the topic. I hope it was helpful. And just when you're ready, go on to the second video.